Welcome back, everybody. So this is going to be my review of the wlmouse Beast X Max. I know I'm about a week or so late, but I have some things to take care of and delayed my review, but this should be worth it. So to start off with, let's just go over the technical specifications of the Beast X Max. So this thing is 126 millimeters in length. It's 65 millimeters in width. It's 39 millimeters in height, and it weighs approximately 43 grams. At least it did in my scale. If you look back at my unboxing video, you can see where I weighed it, and I tested the clicks and everything else. So if you missed that, just go ahead and check out my previous video, and then you'll be able to see what's in the box and everything else. I'm not going to go over it again for this review. It'd be kind of redundant. Yeah, so moving on, as far as internals go, the newest thing that they added to the Beast X Max is a new sensor. It's the Pixart 3395HS. Now this sensor is nothing new as far as the market goes. It's been in the Razer V2 Pro for quite a while now. I'd say a couple of years, but Razer's exclusive contract ran out with Pixart. So now all these Chinese brands and third parties are able to incorporate it into their own designs. Razer themselves have released a Viper V3 Pro that has a newest iteration. I'm assuming with a Pixart sensor, although I opened this up and I couldn't quite see because it didn't have any markings on the chip of what it was. But I'm assuming, if you're going by traditional Razer contract agreements with Pixart, it's probably something newer than the 3950. But anyway, going back to wlmouse, their newest iteration prior to the Beast X Max is the Fens edition. They just recently released now a regular Beast X medium with the same internals as the medium, except it just doesn't have the special coloring and the coating that this does. But yeah, this has a Pixart 3395 sensor. They both have the same size battery. Obviously this is smaller than the Max. The medium has, I believe 122 length versus 126 for the Max. It also has 62 millimeters of width, and I think 37 millimeters of height, if I recall correctly. Weight is also a little bit lighter than the Max, so I'd say by about 4 grams. If you look at my unboxing video, I weighed them both, but I do recall this being about approximately 4 grams lighter than the Max. Obviously, if you're looking at both at first glance, you can see the Max is bigger. It doesn't look much bigger than the medium. And I'd say that's because it's just a few millimeters off. However, when you grip it, you can clearly see because the hump is taller, it conforms to more of my hand than the medium does. So therefore, the optimal grip, I'd say, for this mouse is probably a relaxed claw or even palm if your hands are small enough. Mine are 23 by 13 centimeters for reference. Now for the Beast X medium, you can use smaller hands, and I'd say 17 by 9 centimeters or less is probably more optimal for this. However, given my hand size though, I actually prefer gripping this mouse over the Max. I'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, so this thing is obviously, if you look at the bottom of both of these, this it has a smaller width, and therefore you're able to grip it better, I think, for fingertip movements. And whereas this is more optimal for just holding it, and having a relaxed claw grip because it is wider compared to the medium. If anything, I would say the Beast X Max reminds me of the Final Mouse ULX Tiger in shape and dimensions. Obviously, the hump is a little bit higher than the Tiger, but apart from that, they're very similar to each other. As you can see in the video, even the sides, they're very similar. I think the Beast X Max actually might be a little bit wider than the Tiger, but apart from that, they feel very similar in hand. The hump is lower on the Tiger, and the Tiger also weighs less, than the Max does. So, and as far as balance goes, the Tiger is better balanced than the Max is. The Max is still front heavy like all other wlmouse have been, so you can hold it and you can see it's just kind of falling forward, compared to the Tiger where it's just kind of holding on and it's not moving at all when I hold it from the middle. So yeah, the balancing is not the best for the Beast X Max, but you don't really notice it because the mouse is so light. It's only 43 point some grams, almost 44 grams. So when you're moving around, you're flicking it, it's light enough to where you're never going to notice that's a little bit front heavy. And it's not like hugely front heavy, but it is slightly front heavy compared to something like this, or even compared to the Viper V3 Pro, which this weighs 55 grams. So it's 10 grams heavier than the Beast X Max is. However, because this thing is better balanced, as you can see, I'm holding it and it holds it perfectly. It doesn't tip over anywhere. And it's also longer. Let me move the ULX out of the way. but you can also see the Viper V3 Pro is longer than the BeastX Max, and because of that, the weight is distributed, I think, better. And so when you're moving it around, it doesn't feel like a 55-gram mouse compared to this. Now, this is 44 grams, but because it's front heavier, it doesn't feel 10 grams lighter than the Viper V3 Pro does, even though it is, if that makes sense to you guys. So yeah, that's just, it is what it is. You know, their WL mouse's design has always been front heavy, and I think as a consequence, it just feels heavier in use than it actually is. So let's talk about build quality. I haven't had any issues with this mouse at all. If I press on the sides, press on the top, the bottom, if I'm using the mouse and I'm pressing on the buttons, there's no grinding. So build quality is pretty consistent. It's pretty solid. I don't have any issues with mine, just like I never had any issues with the medium as well. That had no peaking, no flexing issues, or the BeastX OG. I didn't have any issues with this as well. I did notice, however, that there are some people in Discord that did have issues, specifically towards the back here, where they said when they press on it, they can feel it kind of creaking or flexing. Another person noted that with the dot skates, when they pushed down, the mouse was kind of wobbling. So what they did is they tightened the screws, and that fixed the issues for them. But if you notice these issues and it doesn't fix it for you, then contact support. They should take care of you. But you know, I don't want to sound like a WL mouse shill. I don't have any relationship with them. I buy my own mice. So I'm not trying to, you know, make excuses here and say that they've got top-notch, perfect quality. QC varies just like it does with any other brand. So if you notice issues with yours, then go ahead and contact support. But I do buy my copies, and with none of my copies have had any build quality issues. Now, so I've got 3 of them so far. Now, as far as battery life goes, you know, I typically run my mouse at 4K, but I did test it at 8K as well. I think I got solid, maybe like a day out of it, with about 4 or 5 hours of use at 8K. You know, you might be able to extend it to 2 days. Also at 4K, I tend to get about 3 days out of it. So it's decent enough. Not the best battery life in the world. I still get better battery life out of my Razer. And then certainly the Superlight 2 has the best battery life by far. The next thing I want to discuss is the buttons. So we'll start with M1, M2, and then we'll move on to the side buttons as well. So for M1, M2, these are using Omron opticals, just like the OG BeastX did. So this is OG BeastX that I have here. This also used Omron opticals. The Fens edition that they updated, this has TTC knee heels now. These are mechanical. They did this in an effort to save battery life, because the OG BeastX, the battery life is pretty abysmal, you know, and part of it is because they use an optical switch, and the optical switches, you know, continuously drain the battery compared to mechanicals, which don't. So yeah, they now give you the option of TTC knee heels or using opticals, the Omron opticals. So you can pick either one for the BeastX Max. I chose the Omron opticals because simply I like them better than the knee heels. You know, the knee heels, they require higher force of actuation. I mean, it's not too much more, but it's enough to where it bothers me personally. I know there's a lot of people on Discord that don't share my opinion. They seem to like the knee heels better than the Omron opticals, because, you know, for them, it doesn't seem like the force of actuation is a distractor or anything negative. However, for me personally, I play Warzone, and, you know, there's sometimes I use single fire guns, and I like to spam it really quickly, and I just do not like switches that use more force of actuation. So yeah, that's the contrast between the two. Obviously they sound a little bit different as well. As far as the buttons go though, I want to talk about pre-travel and post-travel. As you can see, for both of these switches, there's very little pre and post-travel, almost none at all. So there's, as soon as you press it, it actuates, and then there's very little post-travel afterwards, and that's true for both of the switches. As far as wobble goes from side to side, you know, there's a little bit here, as you can see in the camera. I can move it back and forth a little bit. Now, compared to the medium had very little, almost none at all, but it still had a little bit. As you can see, I'm moving it back around. So there's a little bit here too. I will say though, you're not going to notice this in use at all. When you're moving the mouse around, the wobble of these M1 and M2 is not evident whatsoever. And I tend to press down pretty hard on the mouse, especially like say if I'm kind of, you know, in the middle of a fight in Warzone or something, and I need to concentrate or I need to flick, and I kind of press down on the mouse as I move it around. These buttons do not wobble at all. So whatever little wobble is there, it's not evident in use at all. Now moving on to the side buttons. The side buttons are Omron blue dots, and that's the same thing as a medium. And so nothing's changed in that regard. However, one difference there is that the length of the buttons coming out of the shell, these are more recessed compared to the medium. Let me bring it up to the camera so you can see. So you can see right here, they're not protruding very much. Now, if I bring up the medium, you can see these stick out more than the max does. Let's see if I can put them side by side. But yeah, so you can see right there, the max, they're more recessed compared to the medium, even though they're using on-mods. But however, when I use them, these feel softer for some reason, and they just don't sound as good. They don't feel as good, and it's strange because it's just because of the covers for the buttons. Otherwise, they're identical. But I do like the ones on the BSX medium better. So I think that's kind of a design downgrade as far as this one goes. As far as the scroll wheel, you know, the motion when I move it up and down is very granular, so it feels good in my hand. Also, that force of actuation for the middle mouse buttons is really good. I tend not to like middle mouse buttons that use a lot of weight and that are heavy feeling. This one is not heavy feeling. I can scroll it up and down really quickly, and when I need to, if I need to spam this, I can. So actually, this TTC scroll wheel feels really good, and I think it's identical to the one in the BSX medium as well. So they both feel pretty similar. So overall, I'd say they did a good job with the scroll wheel. The TTC feels good, and I like it. So as far as the button consistency goes, you can start at the top all the way down for both of them, and the force of actuation stays pretty consistent. And that's a good thing, because if you're like me and you use a claw grip or even fingertip grip, you're going to keep your fingers towards the back, and you're going to press like this. And you want to ensure that the force of actuation is the same as it would be up front. And I think for this mouse, at least, it feels pretty consistent. And the same thing is true with the medium as well. With the knee heels, despite them being, you know, heavier with force of actuation, it's still pretty consistent. So that's one thing that's good about wlmouse, is their designs are pretty consistent, despite going to, you know, if you're going from mini to medium to max or whatever, they're all pretty much consistent. They're all pretty much similar in expectation. So as far as the coating goes, you know, it's a smooth coating. It kind of reminds me of anodized aluminum, if you've ever felt that before. You know, obviously this is magnesium, but it has a similar feeling to it. It's not sticky. The grip is not sticky at all. It's pretty smooth. It doesn't attract fingerprints at all, as you can see on here. And whatever fingerprints it does, you can swipe it off right away and they come off. So it's definitely not a fingerprint magnet. To me, it feels good. You know, it may not be a super grippy coating, but I like it. In comparison, the Fend Special Edition, the medium one that I had prior to this, it does have a coating. It feels more chalky and a little bit more grippy compared to this. But it's all, you know, personal preference. I don't have an issue with either one, so I like both of them. So overall, the coating is pretty good. It grips well, and there shouldn't be any issues with the paint wearing off either. So this mouse comes with dot skates, and I think they're pretty good overall. I have a Padsmith Crucible pad, and it's pretty conducive to these kind of skates. It doesn't really dig in when I move it around, and they glide pretty well. But if you have a different kind of pad and you want to change them out, wlmouse does include additional skates. They've got medium ones and full-size ones that you can attach to there. So depending on your preference, you can use those as well. I think with this one, since it was a limited edition, I also got some glass skates. I'm not really sure if the regular BSX Max will have the glass skates or not, but mine did come with them. But for now, I think I'm going to stick with the dot skates because they feel pretty good on this Padsmith Crucible. I have no issues with it. But again, you can always change it out if you're not happy with them. Now I want to talk about gaming performance. So I've had this mouse now about a couple weeks, and I've been using it pretty consistently every day. I would say about an hour to 2 hours a day. And I typically play Warzone, Civ 6, or I'll play, Forbidden West and all kinds of different games. And I'd say for every single one, this has done a pretty good job. Switching from the Viper V3 Pro, which is my main, to this was, it wasn't jarring at all. It felt very natural. My aiming didn't change. My KD didn't change. I can still track with this just as good as I can with the Viper. I can flick with it just as well. So, even though the Viper may have a newer sensor, I don't really see the difference between the two, to be honest with you. It really comes down to shape. And for me personally, I just like the Viper shape better than the BSX Max, despite it being, 10 grams more. So that's all personal preference. You may not. But as far as performance goes, if you're concerned about that, there's really not much of a difference. And I would say, you know what, even with a 3395 in the mix, 3395, 3950, and whatever these guys are using for Razer, there's hardly any difference. You're not going to notice it. So don't worry about sensor performance and all that. Don't get caught up in the hype. Shape is king. I've always said it. So, if the shape feels good to you and you want a bigger mouse like this one, use that. If you like the Viper V3 Pro, which I personally do, then get this. But yeah, as far as gaming performance goes, This has been stellar. I haven't had any issues with it. I can flick, I can track. You know, I haven't noticed any spin outs. You know, it hasn't had any kind of jerky movements. I haven't had some weird DPI issues that some mice do. I haven't had any interference with the wireless performance. So as far as everything else, you know, as far as that goes, the mouse is doing well. I don't have any real complaints. So the mouse software is a little bit different than the OG BSX. It's updated. The UI looks different. When you first started up, you're greeted with a picture of your mouse, what it is, a BSX Max 8K. You see the battery indicator, and you also see your mouse and receiver firmware versions here. So when you click on the mouse, it brings up a performance tab, and the first thing you see is a profile. So you've got 3 different profiles to switch between. I have the 8K receiver attached, so it varies from 125 hertz to 8,000. DPI steps, you can select between 1 and 6. I keep mine at 3. You can also enable or disable XY steps for your DPI, so I typically just keep it enabled. Your debounce time is not applicable. I have Omron switches in mine, but if you do have TTC knee heels, or you'd like to get those when you buy this mouse, then you can obviously set up your debounce time. Sleep time, also, this is to save battery. You can put the mouse to sleep so it doesn't, you know, eat up battery time when you're not using it. Liftoff distance is 0.7 millimeters, 1 millimeters, and 2 millimeters. Now, with original firmware, I don't know if it had the 0.7 millimeters. If I recall, it did not. So wlmouse did release a new firmware. You can go to their Discord or their website, and you can download it, and just download it, flash it, and you should have the 0.7 millimeter liftoff distance available to you. In addition, there's angle snap options, there's motion sync, ripple control, and lock combination. So you turn this on because sometimes people press a combination of the buttons on the mouse that triggers pairing. So the wlmouse included this so that doesn't happen. Also, they have high-speed mode here. Now, I haven't personally seen any benefit for high-speed mode in any of the wlmouse. So, you know, the medium one, the original, or this one. Some people swear by it and they say at 1,000 hertz, it helps them spam better. It is what it is. If you find that it's beneficial to you, then go ahead and turn it on. But however, in my click latency tests, I've never seen a difference with it. So it is what it is. But it does eat more battery. So if you turn it on, just be aware of that. Key bindings, you can obviously set your left button, your forward button, your backwards, right button, and middle button. You can assign different values or different functions to them. Macro, you can set up a macro as well. And finally, for lighting, this is for the receiver. You can set different colors and different effects. You can just a single color or breathe a single color, or breathing, or a single color, and you can set different color keys here as well. That's pretty much it as far as the UI goes. It's basic. It's pretty basic. Now, so if you're wondering if they're going to release a web software, I've heard that they are currently testing web software for these mice. So stay tuned. If you're in their Discord, just pay attention there. They tend to announce things there more than they do their website. So yeah, keep an eye out. The web software should be forthcoming anytime. So click latency using XLAT or XLAT for this, just like they were for the FENS edition. So at 1K, it's 0.35 milliseconds. At 8K, it's 0.354 milliseconds. At 2K, it's 0.355 milliseconds. And finally, at 4K, it's 0.356 milliseconds. So this ranks right at the top with the medium. It's faster than every other mouse that I've tested. Now, Final Mouse does have their 8K firmware that they recently released, but I don't expect the results to change too much. I still think BSX will probably end up at the top. So yeah, you do not have to worry about click latency performance with this mouse at all. Now, as far as motion latency goes, I tested the BSX Max against my controller, which is Lambda Atlantis, at 1600 and 26,000 DPI respectively. I found that BSX Max is 0.1 milliseconds faster than Atlantis, which is a pretty decent showing. So you should not have any issues with motion latency with this mouse at all. The wireless performance is excellent. I think with the new firmware provider that they have, they've managed to fix any issues that they used to with the OG BSX. So as you can see here, there's only one slight off-period pull at 1.5 milliseconds. But apart from that, the performance is excellent. So there's no wireless drop-offs, no spin-outs. So it's pretty solid. Again, if you look at the frequency over time graph, that's also solid. There's a little bit of noise there, but overall, you're not going to notice anything in day-to-day use. So yeah, solid performance overall. So what do I think of this mouse overall? I think it's a pretty solid mouse. If I had to give it a score, I'd say 8.5 out of 10. And you're probably wondering why I give it a lower score than the FENS. Well, there's a couple of reasons. For one thing, I like the FENS coating better than I do this because it does have a special coating. It's a special edition mouse, so it just grips a little bit better. Also, the side buttons for the FENS, they protrude more, so they feel better than these do, even though they're both Omron dots, blue dots. They technically should be the same, but they're not. For whatever reason, these feel better than these recessed ones do. But apart from that, they're very similar. Obviously, this has a newer PixArt sensor, but I don't notice any performance difference between these two. So I'm not going to give this additional points just because it's got a newer sensor. So as far as grip goes, though, I do prefer the medium one over the large, despite my hands being larger. And the reason for that is because this is thinner width, and I feel like, you know, I'm a fingertip grip user for FPS games, and just for me personally, this just works better. I can flick with this better, and I notice my performance overall is just better with a medium compared to the large. For whatever reason, this just doesn't feel as good. However, my day-to-day daily driver is still going to continue to be the Viper V3 Pro over both of these. And I don't know, I do better with this mouse. I do feel like the tracking is a little bit more consistent with the Viper, even though these all feel pretty similar to each other. But again, you know, shape is king, going back to what I originally said. And I just prefer the Viper V3 Pro shape over everything else. But you can't go wrong with any of these mice, any of these WL-BSEX releases. I don't have the mini, but the medium and the max, they both feel fantastic. But personal preference, I like the medium better. One issue that I did run into, which is partially my fault, and it's not necessarily reflective of the build quality of this mouse, is I had to open it up for click latency testing. And let me bring this up to the camera, but you can see there's a tiny ribbon cable that connects to the main board. I don't know if you can see it on the camera or not. But when I open this, and there's a release mechanism for the cable, and as I was pulling on the tab to release the cable itself, the whole tab popped out of the motherboard, and so essentially it broke. And you know, I do have large ape-like hands maybe, and maybe I applied too much, you know, force and it broke it, who knows. But you know, it's not a good look. At least I don't think the design, at least internally, is the best. They could have probably used something better than the cheap ribbon cable and the connector that they have. I also had an issue with the fence cable as well. And you know, I don't really understand it, because these cables that the wlmouse uses, they can't cost more than like 20 cents, you know, and if you ask them to replace it, they charge you like $9 with the shipping fees and everything else. So you can get a replacement cable from Amazon if you do tend to open these up and you run into issues if you break yours. But just be mindful of that. wlmouse themselves say that you're not supposed to open this up because it voids a warranty. Obviously, as a reviewer, I have to open these up for quick latency testing, but if you're an end user, you probably shouldn't. So if you run into any issues with your mouse, just contact support and let them take care of it, because they'll probably deny you support if they find out that you opened it. Yeah, overall, it's a good mouse. I recommend it. So if you're looking for a large size mouse, this is definitely a contender. It's one of the best mice as far as this size category goes. Not my personal day-to-day driver, regardless of whether, you know, side buttons worked or not after the connector broke. I still wouldn't use this as my main driver. I think the Razer Viper V3 Pro is a better mouse overall. The coding, the design, everything is better compared to the BSEX Max. But this is an excellent mouse. It gets an 8.5 out of 10. I do recommend it. And yeah, that's about it, guys. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them at the bottom, and I'll try to get to you in due time. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.